Hi, my name is Liz at Just for Fun Quilting here in Vancouver, Washington. And today we are going to go over how to prepare your quilt and get it ready for long arm quilting. So today here I have my quilt. The first things you want to do is press your quilt. So I've had this quilt in a closet for a long time, so it's been loved. So it's a little wrinkly. So before you want to bring that in, you want to press those seams out. Another thing too that's really helpful, especially if you have a lot of light fabrics, is to go to the back side and trim all of these threads. Because if you have these orange and especially dark colored threads on the light, when you flip it over here, and I have a white table behind, is you might see, it's hard to see maybe on camera, those dark blue lines behind your quilt here. So it would be good to trim those off beforehand. Another thing too is when you're stitching your quilt, I always use a neutral color like a cream or gray, especially if you have a light color background like in this beautiful quilt. And another thing too is if you have a panel quilt like I have here, sometimes panels aren't always printed straight. So even if you have this beautifully printed panel, it might be crooked. I think this one's pretty good. But what you want to do is get a big flat surface and lay out your quilt here and smooth it out. So this one you can see is laying nice and straight and flat. So the person who made this quilt did a very good job. Another thing you want to look at too is if your quilt lays flat like this, you don't see any bubble. See, there's a little bubble right here because of all that tiny piecing. But as long as the quilt will lay on our long arms the same way it lays out on a table. So what we'll often do is we can get some water and iron and we'll iron that out. We'll always try to iron out and flatten your quilt while it's on the machine to get the best stitch out possible. If you notice your quilt starting to do a drag or pull like this, I'm going to force the quilt to do it a little bit. Your quilt might not end up square. Thankfully, this one's laying really good so far. It will lay like that on the machine. To droop or pull, which happens a lot with borders, is you might get something called a tuck. And we'll make a video about what are tucks, what causes them, and how to fix them in the future. So keep an eye out for that video in the future. Another thing too is here's our backing. So the backing is already made for this is for the blue and yellow quilt. Open it up and show you the seam. So this one was just one seam because it's a pretty small quilt. And as you can see, I've sewn the salvage sides together and I've pressed it to one side here. And we want to make sure you don't have any selvage in your seam when you make your back. So for those of you who don't know, a selvage is that end of the fabric that usually has like a name and this little fuzzy edge and dots. Because this is very, very tight, if you have your selvage here in the backing, not only will it make your backing really bulky and might show through your quilt, but will also make it very tight on the machine too. Another thing too is if you've pieced your backing, so let's say you have a strip of fabric in the middle that you want in the middle of your quilt. When you come to the bottom, just make sure you trim your edges straight. We don't want any extra pieces hanging off the bottom. It just makes it easier for us to load it on the machines. All right. And another thing too is if you have directional fabric. So this fabric would be considered non-directional because it's just a bunch of speckles and tonal colors. A directional fabric would be like my little fox fabric here. Now this was a backing that we had to remake. So if you look at it here, the foxes on this fabric are going the same direction of the selvage. So if it was loaded with the quilt, the foxes would be going sideways instead of up and down. Now, how you want to fix that is if let's say you have a panel with a fox on it, and you want the foxes to be going the same direction as your panel, you'd have to get the length of your quilt, which is the long ways of material, rather than the width. Because this fabric is 44 inches wide. And so your back, when you make a seam, will be 88. So it'll be plenty wide for your quilt. But if your quilt was 60 inches long, for example, you would need 68 inches because our long arms need 4 inches bigger on your backing and batting than your top. So if your top is 50 by 60, we need your backing and batting to be at least 58 by 68. Bigger is always better. Now I have my backing stitched onto my leaders. I'm going to throw the quilt back over the bars, lay it out, and we use zippers. Some quilt shops use magnets, others use pins. We just prefer the zippers. It's worked for us for the last almost 10 years. And our quilting machines here are called Innovas. They're big industrial machines. We've had them for about 9 or 10 years now, as of 2026. So here I am coming to the back side of the machine to straighten out and lay the backing nice and flat. So we always load onto the bottom bar first. So I'm going to roll this on here. And I have the bar locked so I can't go the wrong direction. And I'm going to smooth out that backing. We always want your backing to lay flat and taut so we get this nice quilting stitch out. And I'm going to come around to the back side again and zip it to the other side. And so now I'm going to bounce onto the top bar. This just helps our quilt continue to stay nice and taut. That backing is going on the machine really nice and smooth. And then one more time back onto the bottom bar. We have two Innova machines. This is the 12-foot frame. Behind me is the 14-foot frame. And we do about 1,600 quilts a year. All right, so I have my quilt top here. I've lined up the top with the basting line. And as you can see, I have about 4 inches on either side. We do need 4 inches on both sides for our machines to load. And then I'm just going to baste that down about within a 1/4 inch, so between an eighth and a quarter away from the edge. And we always baste all the edges before running our rows so that the quilts stay flat and they don't flip up on the edge as they quilt. All right, so I have my quilt sides all basted. So that's going to hold down the quilt as it long arms. And I have my project all loaded on the computer. We are going to do a mitten meander. So it's cute little swirls with mittens on there. And there goes the machine. And when it's done, it will chime when it's ready to roll. Our machine uses a bowl rather than a hopper foot. The nice thing about the bowl is it's smooth and it glides right over the quilt, makes it less likely to push around or get caught on any seams.